Good evening, everyone. It being 6 p.m. on Wednesday, May 22nd, 2024, we'll begin our callback meeting this evening for the FY25 budget hearings for the Committee of Ways and Means. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence for all those who serve in our military at home and abroad and for their families. Thank you. Clerk Semino, can we have a roll call, please?
Councilor Barrica?
Here.
Councilor Moran?
Here.
Councilor Flaherty?
Here.
Councilor Maglio?
Here.
Councilor Reynolds? Here. Thank you.
Excellent, all present. There are no approval of minutes this evening, and there is no old business. And as I've been saying over the last several weeks, the public hearing on the town budget will be on Wednesday, May 29th at 7 p.m. We will be taking public comment during that time at the full council meeting. Again, that's a Wednesday night, a week from today at 7 p.m. And thank you, as always, to BCAM for televising all of our meetings. All right, with that, we're going to move on to our new business this evening, which is 24020 Mayor FY 2025 operating budget, or take up any action relative thereto. Do we have a motion to take that off the table?
Move to take off the table order number 24020, Madam Chair.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous. And this evening, we have with us our acting chief, Fred Viola, from our fire department, as well as finance director, Michael Esmond. This is our callback to get some clarification from the fire department on their budget proposal. And Chief Viola, would you like to start off, or do you have a statement, or would you just like questions?
I think that you had some questions that you posed to me, and I answered them. So I think what I'd like to do is, if you have any questions on those responses, I'd be more than happy to answer them to the best of my ability. I will say that it's only been 5 minutes. I'm sorry, it's only been 5 days since the last time we spoke, but I have actively been working with management. I met with the union representatives today with some of the ideas and mitigation ideas that we have to moving forward. They have a membership meeting tomorrow night. They will take those under advisement and get back to me, and then we will meet again with management to try and come to a something that's amenable to moving forward after July 1st.
Thank you very much, Chief Viola. And just to clarify for people at home who might be watching, first of all, we know you're new to this role, though not new to the Braintree Fire Department, and we really appreciate the work you've done thus far. So maybe what I would propose, if it's amenable to my committee members, is I can read the question/statement I sent up to get clarification, and then maybe we can start with that, and if councilors have questions or clarifying comments. Does that sound good to everybody? Okay. All right, so this was my understanding when we last met, and I believe it is accurate, though you do have clarifications here that I'll let you get into. But again, for the benefit of the public, a full complement of Braintree firefighters is 21 per shift. Currently, our contractual obligations require that there are always at least 17 firefighters on duty. That means if on any given day there are more than 4 firefighters using much-deserved vacation time, out sick, injured, or on long-term leave, the so-called vacant slot is filled with overtime, or using overtime. To contend with the financial crisis we're in right now, the fire department under Chief O'Brien recommended reducing the minimum manning requirements to 13, which would significantly reduce the overtime costs. I want to be clear with residents, this does not mean that there will only be 13 firefighters on a shift. It means 9 firefighters would have to be absent at the same time before the vacancy is filled using overtime. And as you mentioned, Chief, by modifying the staffing schedules, working alongside the union, coordinating vacation time, your aim, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and the fire department's aim is to provide sufficient staffing to have all but one ladder truck available for all emergencies at all times, which would require a minimum of 15 firefighters out of a complement of 21. And it's also to be noted that this approach means that we do not lay off any of our valued firefighters. All those who are on the force today will continue to serve Braintree. So, Chief, if you want to clarify any of that or confirm that, I think that would be helpful for all of us.
Yeah, so
here.
as we know, the budget that was proposed was at a 13-person minimum. There are not, to clarify, there are not 21 persons per group right now. We are short-staffed. We have 20 on 3 groups and 19 on 1 group because of where I am today.
Thank you for
So
clarifying
that causes a little bit of a problem with the overtime, but really, the manageable vacation time and personal time that's allotted is not the issue here. The issue is the additional injury, the unpredictables, if you will, FMLA and the such. So that's why I highlighted in there that there was, that we're not at 21. If we were at 21, yes, you are correct in that respect. But we're not at 21. Each group has 20, and one has 19 because of me, and then we will have a retirement coming shortly after July 1st. So that's where we're at with the staffing part of that. What we aim to do is to get the most out of the personnel that's on duty to fill the most vehicles to provide the fire protection for the town. At 13, that keeps the lights on. I'm just going to talk simply.
Yep.
That keeps the lights on. That puts the Highlands Engine 3 in service and gives you a ladder truck at headquarters and an engine at headquarters. The largest district has 2 trucks in it. So people will respond to emergency calls during this crisis, if you want to call it a crisis, during this fiscal challenge, we'll call it. I have to make that clear because I don't want people to think that we're going to shut buildings down. Is this ideal? It's not ideal. But is it manageable at this time? Yes, it's going to be manageable because of some of the things that we are proposing for the union and for us to be able to do to flex and just have, we can't really predict what's going to happen. We can't predict when fires are going to happen. But we can predict our high times and our times of need, right? 4th of July, Labor Day weekend, the fireworks day, different things like that, where we're going to need more staff on because of the call volume. And that's what my job is to make sure that I'm doing that and doing it properly. So we'll monitor that monthly. We've already sort of agreed to a system with my team to sort of write that stuff down and understand a little bit more about what triggers and what doesn't trigger the overtime, if that makes any sense.
That's very helpful, and I also want to, thank all the firefighters. I know when you have a contract, this is not the thing you expect to have happen, so appreciate those conversations. I'd like to open it up to my colleagues on the committee for questions or comments on this or clarifying any clarification that's required. Councilor Moran?
Thank you. Good evening, Chief. Just to go further, I've got some correspondence that you sent, and that in your current situation where you are short a number of individuals on shifts, you have invoked a clause in the contract that allows minimum staffing to be dropped to 16 when an illness or injury has a member out for 60 shifts, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so that's in effect right now. So if you're in a situation where you can go under to 16 before overtime's in on a couple of those shifts.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Moran. Councilor Flaherty, did you have a question?
Thank you so much, and thank you for coming back. I appreciate it. So that to help me understand, and how, understand how we're going to man everything appropriately. Can you describe to me the way that scheduling is managed? Do you have a software that you use? Is there a meeting that you have to decide how to coordinate people's schedules? Like, what are the strategies that you're adopting that now that you weren't using before?
So far, we do have a personnel staffing application that people can take time, and we know who's off and who was hired and why. But it doesn't dig down deep enough to get to percentages and all that. It's sort of it's a very good app, and it works very well, but it doesn't give us the data that we need. So I've enlisted some help with some of my team, with myself involved, and we're actually almost counting by hand, if you will, to get some better numbers so we understand trends and understand how we can mitigate and keep mitigating in different ways. Does that answer your question? I think what we do now, the 16-man drop after, 16-person drop after the 60 shifts is one of those. That eliminates that extra body that's needed to make 17. Now it's 16. So that's one of the ways that we can do it. The other ways are really kind of unpredictable and really not able to be enforced really, because they're different things that pop up, injuries and FMLA and sick, and so it's hard for me to stand here and say, well, yeah, we know this, and this yet, but we're working on some means to try and get that to a good place where we can know that, and then we can I can move people around as well. Just so, for instance, my group that has 19 on it, if I had that body, if I had the extra person on a different group, I could slide them over to make everybody 20. But right now, with the retirements coming up and stuff, I don't have that. So me being here is just dropping that group one more person, if that makes any sense to you.
It does. So in my family, there are 4 of us, and we all have schedules, and we try to coordinate, and it's hard. It's very challenging because everybody's doing something different, and if we want to come together at any given time, we have to check individually with each one, and there's only 4 of us, so there's many, many more firefighters. So you have an app that you use to coordinate schedules?
Yes, and then we have rules within that app, so if the three firefighters are off and a 4th one wants to take it, there's really it's an officer's spot, so they can't take that. So that's one way of managing if I'm getting to where you want to be. Mm-hmm. Same with the lieutenant. If one lieutenant's off, 2 lieutenants really can't be off. It has to be a captain or a deputy and a lieutenant.
And are you looking at different software to be able to manage this in a way that you could look back at whatever it is that drives overtime up sometimes?
Yeah, not so much different software. We're going to use this software, but we're going to try to expand on it. But right now we'll be doing it incrementally by hand, by month, and then we'll add it to a spreadsheet so that we'll have that information. It's the best way to do it for us right now. Because this does report, but it doesn't report, I believe it was your question that asks about when and how often. So we're doing that by hand right now so I can report that back to you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Reynolds?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome again for coming back.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Director Esmond as well, thank you for your patience with us and this exercise. So I'm going to continue on that line of questioning in terms of the overtime. And if I just heard correctly, one of the guidelines for vacation scheduling is, you said only 3 firefighters per shift are allowed vacation time.
That is correct.
And that's across all 3 stations. That's per 24-hour shift and the manning that you have for that shift.
Yes, that's contractual language that is built into the contract with Local 920.
Oh, okay, thank you for confirming that in my understanding. And would you have available, and as part of your review, trying to get a handle on this overtime, what is the biggest category listed right now that drives the need for someone to work overtime? In other words, the categories of vacation, sick time, injured, long-term leave / FMLA. Am I missing any?
No, right now, there's two big factors. One is that we're short-staffed, so that five-person being off type of thing is,
And that's, just to be clear, because this is important for me and for others to understand as well, is that there's references here in this conversation that a full complement is 21.
yes.
Okay. Presently, without invoking any other clauses, that the minimum is 17 of those 21 need to be on. If for whatever, so that's 5 people who, per shift, you have a flexibility of either being out injured, on vacation, calling in sick, disability, right? So you're down to your 17 people. And so of those right now in the 17, how many, like, does your listing, does your documentation from a historical data collection, so that data is really important for you to make these decisions. It sounds to me that's the direction you're going. You're asking for assistance. Just try to compile data to paint a picture. Data tells a story. Data validates. Data helps direct decision making. What is the biggest driver?
Long-term injury and FMLA.
Long-term injury and FMLA. Okay, and how many firefighters? So what is your full complement of firefighters when you're fully manned?
88.
88.
Well, 88 on the suppression force. There's the...
Right, so for suppression, that's what we're going to stick to,
Yep.
it's a suppression. And right now, how many able-bodied are on active duty for suppression?
I believe it's 83.
83. So you're down 5 people. And those 5 people you spread, how many shifts a week are there?
There are four groups, 2 shifts a week,
All right.
24
4
hours. Actually, but they break them up into 2, so the shifts per week are...
How many times are you required to have 21 people on duty?
All
from
the time.
Monday at midnight
Well,
till,
Yeah, 8 a.m. to 8 a.m. to 8 a.m.
okay.
But if I take time off, I take 2 vacation days for 1 shift, if that makes any sense to you. They're broken
Yeah,
up
because
into
it's,
day and night.
your vacation time is tracked by 7.5 hours, right?
Yep.
But
day
the
and
shift
night.
itself is 24 hours. Okay, so, all right, so they're taking 2 vacation days, and how many vacation, no, I won't go down that.
That's a whole different...
Yeah,
that's
and
too
that's
much.
another element to the complexity of what you're trying to handle here, I get that. So injury, how many folks do you have out on injury right now of those 83? Or do the injured are included in the 88?
I have 2 long-term right now.
And are they in that delta, that 5 between the 88 and the 83? Do those,
Yes.
all right, so above the 83 you have available for duty today? Is that right? Is that
I have,
number?
no.
So the number of people you have available for duty today is lower than 83?
No, it's 83.
It is
Yeah,
83?
I thought you said above 83. It's not. It's 83.
Okay. So those injuries, what did you just say, 3, long-term?
2.
2.
Well, one's coming long-term. Someone's out again, so,
All right, so you're short 1 person, that's just an open slot, right?
yep.
So that brings you down to 87? Just-
Where are you getting that number from? We're
All
at
right, no, I had
83.
asked you, I'm sorry if I'm confusing you, Chief. 88 is the total authorized number of personnel on your suppression team,
Yes.
right? That's what you were allowed to hire, 88 people on your suppression team. So if I start there, that's my start number
Okay.
for 88.
2 long-term injuries,
Too long, I'm down to
86.
86.
86. Someone on admin leave,
1 on admin leave.
85. 2 on long-term injury, but not to the point of cutting to 16 yet. So that's 83,
Yeah.
right?
All right, 2, 2, and 1, right, that brings you down to 83. You also mentioned that you've got one of those 88 slots, somebody went to the academy and didn't finish it, and that position is not filled.
No, that was before, that was about before.
So that is no longer a situation dealing.
No, it's still an open spot, but it was never filled.
It was never filled, so that open spot is part of your 88 when you start at 88, right? So now I can add
Go
those.
82.
I can add the 5 you just mentioned to me that were long-term administrative leave and whatever, that 5 count that got you to 83. But how do we account for that one slot that's not filled? Does that bring you down to 82 available people then?
Yeah, it could bring it to 82. I just don't figure it because it's just,
It's not an available person for you to program in.
yeah, it's not even in the,
And
it's
you're
not
not
even in the
paying
realm.
anybody, right? You're not paying
No.
anybody.
No.
So that's an important factor. But for your operational effectiveness, 88 people is what you desire to have.
Yeah, I'd like to have 98 if I could.
Yeah,
but,
okay,
you know,
all
it's-
right. And I'm sorry to be so laborious about this, but it's important to get this understanding, because unfortunately, you have a lot of moving parts. You really do.
You think?
Yeah, a little bit, a little bit, yeah. So, and you have been thrown into the deep end really quickly, right? But thankfully for you and the experiences that you've accumulated through the years, I think that you are the type of individual who is definitely up for this responsibility.
Thank you.
Okay, I just want to make sure that you understand that. So, and the reason I'm asking all of these questions, I'm really trying to get to the meat of the matter is, now I can apply with a bit more clarity when you're trying to man your shifts, all of your shifts. And that you want to have ideally, so we know 21 is an unrealistic number that you have for every shift that comes up, right? It's more like, well, if you only got 82 people, you've outlined here in your answer to the chairwoman's responsibility of group 1, 2, 3, and 4 and what their actual numbers are, right? So we see that 20, 21, 20, and 20. So you're down,
Technically 19 because of the group 1 is me. Well, I'm on group 1.
so you're
And,
down to 19.
Yeah, so
Right, I got
that group
that.
is a little bit short.
Got it, okay. So group 1, in order to keep 17 as a minimum, you can only have 2 people out on that shift at a time.
They're at 16. They're one of the groups I put to 16.
One of them went to 16.
Yeah, I told you, that's a management tool you can.
But
knock-
of that
knock at least one
16,
off.
do you write tonight, if that shift was on, would there actually be 16 people or 17, one on
No,
overtime?
there's 16.
Just 16?
Yes.
So you are operating under 17 then, in one case?
Yeah, in those cases that are allowed by contract, I utilize those, yeah.
All right, great, great. If that's 16, if someone called out of that 16, that's going to be an overtime situation, you're going to have to backfill it, or do you?
Yes, on those particular groups, I would, yes.
You would have to backfill it.
Currently.
And of the other 3 groups that have 20, or I should say the other 2 that have 20, again, that brings you down, you still have the flexibility of 3 people being off
Yes.
on that shift. And everyone's meeting contractual requirements.
Yes.
Agreements, I should say, agreements.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, going back, how much, this is the really tough part for me to get my head around. When you got so many senior people, what's that for vacation time? 5 weeks?
Yes.
So 5 weeks, so they've got 25 vacation days. Do you
And
do any?
then, there's 4 personal days. They were just, in the last round of negotiations, they got an extra personal day.
Which
So there's
brings
4
it-
personal days as well.
4
which they can
personal
use.
days. That's for everyone, regardless of seniority or time in service.
Yes, that was negotiated in the last contract.
Okay, so personal days is another factor. So, and is there opportunity to carry over personal and/or vacation and/or sick time?
The only time you could, well, you can carry over 5 days if you needed to. But if you're out injured, obviously, you can carry everything over.
You can carry over 5, what, of all 3 categories? Excuse me, the 2
No,
categories?
just the vacation days.
Just vacation?
Yeah.
Can sick be carried over?
Yeah, sick is accruable. As you come to work, you get a day.
So if I have, what do you get, 10 sick days, 9 sick days?
It averages to, I think it's 15 a year. There's a day and a quarter a month. You have to come to the work for a month and then get a day and a quarter.
All right, so you get 15 sick days on top of vacation days. on top of.
But you don't, and when you say, I just got to correct you, it's just, when you say get 15, you earn 15. You can't use more than 8 without a doctor's note,
Got it.
okay? Or
Thank you.
3
No,
in-
that's an important
Or
distinction.
more than 3 in a row, you need a doctor's note. So there are some safeguards built into that.
Okay.
I just want to make sure I make that clear.
All right, well, no, that is an important clarification. That's just another input to you, this equation you have to try to solve,
Yes.
right? Okay. So, I get it, the distinction, you have to earn it. It's the way I've always, my vacation time and my sick time is always earned, just the way the accounting goes. You work X amount of hours, you earn X amount of hours in vacation or sick time. But the personal time is always there. Okay, so, and with older, what would you say the percentage of your department, you had given me some numbers the other night about how many people you anticipate are going to be maxed, or not maxed out, or eligible for retirement in the next 3 years and then in the next 7 years. Something, it was
Yeah,
a
it's
pretty good
something
amount.
Yeah, something like 31 and 41 respectively till 65. 65 is a mandatory retirement age, so if you did the math, then they have to leave. And if they didn't leave or they left early, then it would be a different number, but
Okay,
that makes sense.
sure. And then there's also the option of, do you do buyouts?
No, not at this time, no.
No. Okay. All right. All right. All right. You've helped kind of, for my edification, you've given me some more factors of the overtime. So my last question to you was going to be this. I know I asked this question of Chief O'Brien last year in this budget process about when did the town go to a 24-hour shift? And why did they go to a 24-hour shift? And the answer I got was to address the overtime problems that we're having. Can you describe to me the thought between, or what you see for yourself, where a 24-hour shift gives you benefits and more flexibility to respond without having to use overtime versus a straightforward, what was the previous shift, 8 hours, 12
No, they were
hours?
always 10 and 14, but they were broken up.
Okay. So what was the thought, or what, from your position, you might not have been there then, but what would be the thought that drives someone to think that a 24-hour shift is a better way for you to manage overtime?
I think data across our industry actually had driven that, and it did. But the problem is that we have injuries, we have unforeseeable things happen. So I don't really think that correlates to an overtime issue being on a shift that, whether it's 10 or 14, I just, you know what I'm saying? I don't think that really correlates to anything other than, we have a lot.
But if you have 4 shifts, and before you went to a 24-hour,
Yeah.
were there 4 groups or more?
No, still 4 groups.
There were still 4 groups?
Yes.
So,
Same amount of, minimum manning. Minimum manning was 19, now it's 17. Since the last Proposition 2.5, well, when Proposition 2.5 was first enacted, it dropped. So, I don't think the
Okay.
town's any smaller today than it was then.
right.
So
It
it's-
was.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I meant to say, is it was a lot smaller than it is now, so
Okay. All right.
that's why you could see the 13 being a little bit of an issue for some of the members and myself, but we're going to manage this. And that's,
Yep.
Chief O'Brien's vision was a manageable situation, and not ideal, but we're going to try to get through this the best we can.
No, and I know you are. I know you are, and that has always been a commitment I've heard from the fire department, so that's not a doubt in my mind. But I'm trying to better understand, to see if there's any kind of additional insight from my own experiences of managing overtime and managing staffs through the years. So the more I understand how your shifts work and what are the inputs or the impacts of your ability to put out a minimum force per shift every week, it gives me a little bit more insight to understand why the overtime numbers go the way they have been going. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor Reynolds. Counselor Maglio?
Yes. Thank you. So I just have one clarification that I need because I'm very confused. So on Monday, we talked about manning down to 13.
Yes.
And then tonight, we've a couple of times mentioned 15. So is that where the compromise is right now, that you're working out with the union at 15?
There's nothing that is etched in stone or anything like that. Conversation that we've had is just having the ability to flex, because I'm just going to give you a scenario that's real life. There's 20 people on a group. 3 firefighters are off. We're at 17. Everybody's over there. There's 17 people. We're going to have the truck staffed like they should be. So is that every day? No. In the summertime, it's higher. In the fall, it's less. There might be nobody off.
What's higher, the people that are there or the people that are
The
out?
people that are there.
Okay.
So this 13 doesn't mean that, at 13, everybody else goes home. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about if time off reaches to that point, that's the minimum. So in between that, when we have those different numbers, we'll manage that with different ways of responding and adding to equipment and personnel, if that makes sense for you.
It does make sense. Can I repeat it back to you to make sure that I understand what you mean? So that for a scenario, on some days, it may go down to 13, and that's fine. Other days, it may go down to 13, but there's a reason that you need to maybe pull a few more in and get it up to 15. And that's the flexibility that the leadership will decide as you go, depending on what's happening in the
Yes, and
town.
that's my job based on experience, based on trends that I see, that I know. I can tell you that Labor Day weekend is a nightmare. I can tell you that the 4th of July is always a busy time. I can tell you that the high school day is a big day. And we can see that stuff. When shopping at the plaza becomes a problem, or it's a great thing, you should shop at the plaza. But when the traffic is heavier and, that's my job to manage. And I just need that buy-in, that cooperation, and all the other things so that I can manage it to make it equitable for the town and safe for the firefighters.
Okay, that makes perfect sense to me. Thank you. And then just a follow-up, for every call, is there an ambulance that also goes to that location as well?
That would be for an EMS call, yes. So we are, all the Braintree firefighters are EMTs. So when you go to a medical call, we're basic life support. We still have cardiac defibrillation, we have epinephrine, we have CPR Lucas machine, and we have Narcan. So when we respond to a medical call, we are completely outfitted at the basic life support level. The ambulance comes there at the advanced life support level, so 42 medicines, intubation, cardiac monitoring, and the like. So only on the medical calls an ambulance comes. And then if we have a fire, we obviously have an ambulance come for either victims of the fire or to be on standby in case there's a firefighter injury.
Okay, so I thought that ambulances were automatically going to accompanying fire engines to calls. But that's only if the caller says, someone was hurt, we have an
Yes.
emergency. What would be an example of a call where an ambulance would not go? Like, what would I call in and say when I called 911?
The most common, my smoke detector's beeping and I'm not sure why at 0:30 at night. So we would, we have the availability to monitor air quality.
Okay.
So we'll go into the home with the monitor to check the air quality. If it was poor, then we would call an ambulance for them to be seen at a local hospital if they choose, and that type of thing.
Okay.
Fire alarms, calls for fire, outside fires. Sometimes we'll have the ambulance come if we're going to be there for a prolonged period of time in the event of an injury. That's really it. But they go to every medical call too, as well.
Excellent, okay. And you were saying that every firefighter is also a certified EMT?
Yes.
Excellent, okay. Those were my questions, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Maglio. And thank you, Chief, for all the clarification this evening. And just to piggyback on what Councilor Maglio was asking, I think just, brass tacks, right? We want to make sure, and I know you, of all people, and your team want to make sure that the response times are as quick as they are today, which I believe is 3 minutes except for Wood Road, if I'm remembering correctly. So in some of the scenarios you just described where there may be 15 people on or there may be 13 people on, do you anticipate an increase to response times?
Again, unpredictable, but if I make a district wider because we don't have the staffing, that particular day, to drive from here to the end of the headquarters district is 3 to 4 minutes.
Okay.
But to drive from here to a wider district, minimal.
Okay.
Extra minute, extra two. It's a big deal in a fire, though, a very big deal in a fire, but we will still have the 3 stations functioning, even at 13. I need to press that to people, and I don't want them to panic. You know what I mean? Because those districts will still be stocked. It's just the cavalry as they come will be, that's what will be the delay. So that's a safety issue for the fire department? Yes, it is. And that's what we're trying to do by mitigating some of this and getting that flex and getting that, the ground under us first. We don't know we haven't done this yet, so we have to
Yep.
get to it and understand how it trends and how it works out, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
no, thank you very much for the clarification, and I certainly, I feel much more comfortable with the information, and thank you for all of the in-writing responses and for being back with us this evening. And, this is not a situation that anyone in town in any department or any resident wants to be in, but I am appreciative and grateful with the seriousness with which you're taking this, and thank you again to all of the firefighters in Braintree who are right alongside you, it sounds like.
Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead, Councilor Reynolds, follow up?
Just one more question, if I may. Chief, fire alarm repair, what exactly are the fire alarms that get repaired? Because I don't believe, it's not the old box on a telephone pole anymore, is it?
There are still some out there. They worked over the last year or two to remove some of those. There are still some that are on some town buildings, and we're working with Captain Bouvet on that transition. There's a little bit of cost involved and things like that, so.
So what replaces the fire alarms that you've just described?
Monitoring, central monitoring.
Central monitoring, which the assumption would be that there would be some kind of connectivity, right?
Yes.
Some kind of technological connectivity for you to be able to monitor.
Yes.
Okay, and that is what? Do you utilize the infrastructure in town that the...
No, it'd be central station alarms. Private companies come in, they put, these devices on, panels on that will ring to a central station, and that beyond, they would notify us by phone.
A radio signal versus a wire line.
Yeah, pretty much.
If you will, to
Or
make it
Wi-Fi.
simple.
These days, it's usually Wi-Fi or...
Wi-Fi. Okay. All right, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, Councilor Reynolds. Any other questions for the chief on the fire department from committee members? Okay, Chief Viola, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me, and anyone, if you have questions, please reach out, so we can, as we work through this, you won't be in the dark, and you don't have to leave your constituents in the dark as well.
Well, we really appreciate that, and my recollection is from our last meeting, believe it was Councilor Maglio, or one of the committee members asked for an update after the first quarter to see how it's going. I think we would be grateful and appreciative, so thank you again for coming back this evening.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay, but you're free to go.
88 degrees out, I'm going.
That was our only departmental callback for our budget hearings. And again, I want to offer our gratitude to Finance Director Esmond, who has been here through every single meeting with us, and also to my colleagues on the committee. This has been a long process. This is our final budget hearing right now. But before we start in with the motions, are there any other questions or concerns from members, or do people feel they're ready to vote? Councilor Flaherty?
Thank you. So I wanted to ask about a line that I'm not sure where I can find it in the budget, because I've looked, but I was under the impression that there was $500,000 in the budget related to a reserve for the schools. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
I can't find it in the budget. Can you
Sure.
explain?
Sure. So in the budget motions, and I know this came up very briefly, and it feels like a while ago, but maybe a couple weeks ago. So it was a point of emphasis very quickly. But in the budget motions, in the first section, there's a budget motion number 9. This is the one that the town auditor had opined about this being a sort of a unique item, and we could have filed it as a supplemental item for fiscal '24 rather than '25. We included it with the mayor's budget motions as part of the package of her filing, but and because there was emphasis to this. But in that reserve that you see there, what the mayor's proposal would do is to transfer $1.5 million of free cash in this fiscal year and make it available as a reserve through fiscal '25. The mayor's proposal anticipates at least $500,000 of that amount to be available for the school department for essentially one-time costs that will help with the transition through fiscal '25. I sort of touched on this very briefly yesterday. We'll be working with the superintendent, with the school committee to identify those items, report back to Ways and Means on what those would be. I think we will be looking, as we say here, to defray costs associated with costs that will be presumably transitional. One item that we definitely would cite that will give them modest budget relief was the executive search funding that was added back and felt by the school committee was important for them to fund for an outside third party to fund executive search. That's a very straightforward one-time cost that we could give them some budget relief, but we'll be working with them to identify from that pool, other costs that they can, to help defray these. And, I think it goes without saying for this group, but just to give emphasis again, a lot of these reductions were done very quickly in order to meet the targets and the budget development process for fiscal '25. And so we want to be able to give, where appropriate to this funding source, options for the school department to be able to defray some of the costs as they're working through, whether it's the $79.5 million or the $75.5 million in funding. So that, Counselor, is where we are talking about that reserve.
Okay, so it's unusual for money that is intended for schools to be held townside. Can you comment on why it's being handled that way instead of being included into the school budget?
Well, I see your point. I think, one is I think the 500,000 is, we set it as a floor. It's not a minimum commitment, but it's not absolutely certain yet what that will ultimately will be. This reserve will also be used for anticipating some of the costs that will be felt townside that are associated with the employee separations that are contemplated in this budget. So there will be some of those costs that are that we need to account for and are not necessarily accounted for in each department's budget. But more, I think, to the point is under the reserve under HR will allow us to have a little bit of extra oversight as to linking the purpose. We've talked a lot here in this whole budget discussion and narrative development about the use of one-time resources and making sure that we're being using those resources appropriately, this will give us the ability to have an additional layer of oversight to that. And that's, also an important thing. I think we want to make sure that we're being consistent with what we've stated here, which is that this is free cash is a one-time resource, and we want to make sure that that there is oversight to that. It's not to say that if we just directly transferred the funding or otherwise appropriated it into a department's budget that they wouldn't use it for this, but this is an ability for us to have some additional oversight for that. And I think that's an important piece of this, particularly since we've been giving such emphasis about the use of one-time resources as contributing to some of the underlying structural problems we have in this fiscal 25.
So is this a measure that's being made considering our very, very austere budget circumstances at present, or is this meant to be a precedent to expect to see again and again going forward?
I wouldn't expect that this is a going forward prospect. I think this is really something we're employing this year, and ideally we really wouldn't be. You wouldn't see a reserve of this magnitude at all, going forward. And to the extent you did, it might be solely for things like collective bargaining or something like that. So I wouldn't anticipate this as setting a precedent for going forward, unless there was something where, again, it was something along these lines, if there was a one-time resource or something that hadn't yet fully been programmed, but we were looking for support that the funding needed to be in place. Collective bargaining is probably the best example of that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. I'll just follow up on that, Director Esmond, and appreciate Councilor Flaherty bringing that to our attention again. So this 1.5 million, which I know we talked about, I think on the first night, that's going to be taken from our free cash and put in a different reserve for similar purposes, which is one-time expenses. This would be in addition to, if the override were to pass, the 1.5 million in the override stabilization fund.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay. And along those lines, do we have, are we expecting, should the Municipal Empowerment Act not pass, even with the best of intentions at the state legislature, their term or their voting term expires soon? Are we anticipating, and that's close to $1 million that is budgeted, but not guaranteed by any stretch of the imagination? Is this 1.5 going to be used to cover that as well?
No, this 1.5 is separate from that. In motion, 2, we would propose to draw or to reserve an additional $920,000 in free cash for fiscal 23 and reserve it from fiscal 23 certified free cash, reserve it in fiscal 25 for the purposes of having a revenue source in balance and available should the Municipal Empowerment Act not be adopted.
Okay.
So this is separate and distinct from that. And what this motion would do is be rescinded, essentially repeal that, should we have Municipal Empowerment Act successfully adopted by the legislature, and then, of course, also, after the mayor were to file for it, that town council would also ratify it as well, or adopt it as well. So
Right.
it's contingent on those two acts of different legislative bodies, of course.
Okay, so what am I missing on why pull out, and maybe I just misunderstood or didn't understand why are we pulling out the 1.5 from our free cash? Is it going to, like, if it's being used for essentially the same purpose in motion number 9 that you just discussed?
Well, I'm sorry, these are different purposes. The 921,000 is really just essentially it's a revenue source.
Yep.
It is our hope and sort of statement that we hope that it will be repealed, we won't need it, and the Municipal Empowerment Act revenues that were forecasted will essentially replace it. The 1.5 is totally separate and above
Yeah.
it, and would be a reserve that would be available for the purposes we talked about, which would be for those transitional costs associated with payroll restructuring and other, similar purposes for fiscal '25.
Okay, but if you're pulling 1.5 million out of free cash in number 9,
Yeah.
then that removes the council's oversight from use of those funds. Is that correct? Is that why we're doing this mechanism? Rather than keep, because if the 1.5 is meant to be used for the same purposes as free cash, which is to cover one-time costs, and not to go to a specific department, as Councilor Flaherty pointed out, by extracting that from our general free cash pool, am I understanding correctly that then the council would lose oversight of how that 1.5 is spent because it's now in a separate reserve account at the mayor's discretion only?
As a reserve, it wouldn't be subject to further appropriation. I think we would expect that we would be reporting back regularly, though, as to the use of it, though. I think we would want to be very transparent with the town council and Ways and Means on what we were using that for. Yeah, in the sense that it's not anticipated to be subject to further appropriation. In that sense, yes, there wouldn't be further this doesn't anticipate us needing further to come back and have a further act in consideration, but I think there's every intention on our part to be very transparent of the use of these funds and how they would be transferred to the various departments for town government.
Okay, so just to follow that thread, then what is then why? Is it speed? Is it if? And I take you at your word. If you're going to report back to the council, why pull up 1.5 million out of our free cash so that the council no longer has oversight over that, of any kind, over that amount of money?
I think it's just so that we have the funding available and it's tied with this budget. It goes hand in hand with this budget, and so the timing of it was really kind of the the main point of us introducing it now, to ensure that we have the resources and to signal and to file for the intent to use free cash one-time resources for this purpose.
I'm gonna have to think about, I guess I'm gonna need to think this through because the council's real only power here is ordinances and oversight of taxpayer dollars. And while, again, I don't have any cause to believe that you won't be spending this wisely, this does strip one of the few remaining powers the council has, and I'm not really getting a sense that it's necessary from the information you're giving me.
If we didn't propose this reserve and we didn't hold these funds from fiscal '23 certified free cash aside now, then we would presumably be asking, coming back to town council at some point later in the year in fiscal '25, '26, for this. For these other purposes, I think it's a timing issue, as you noted, and I think it's just probably something we think is very likely to be the case, and also that we may be incurring these costs very, in short order. Some of these costs. And so I think I understand exactly, Madam Chair, your point. I think it's just a matter of us, this proposal we think is going to be necessary for us to be able to transition, through some challenging financial, fiscal challenges for some of our budgets, and having this in place in short order, coinciding with the beginning of fiscal '25, is going to help us manage through those situations. And I think we would, I probably would just come back to, I think we had every intention of making sure that we're reporting regularly on those uses of the reserves, and wouldn't not anticipate doing anything sort of that I think is out of the lockstep of folks' understanding of what we would be doing here.
And I appreciate that, and I think that to counter that, that would be why, you should feel confident then that the council would approve the use of that funding. But by stripping that out, we lose all oversight of that amount of money. And if you come back to us, and, I think you've seen that we're a pretty cooperative body, and it's, legitimate and we understand, then I don't see why that wouldn't, as you said, wouldn't be approved. But I have concerns about taking out $1.5 million that we lose all oversight over, and I'll leave it at that for now. Councilor Moran?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mike, turning to your HR, the majority of this money is going to go to unemployment, right?
I don't know about a majority, Councilor, but a large part.
Well, how many, even with the override passing, how many approximately people are going to get laid off?
Anticipating right now probably somewhere between 50 and 60.
Okay. So you've got right now in your budget under personnel, HR administration, line department 15201, line 517004, $100,000 for unemployment compensation,
Yes.
which is a reduction from what we paid in FY23 of $132,563. I presume that it was previously funded, or amounts over that amount funded in prior fiscal years were augmented by free cash, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, where this would be anticipated. There's also not a lot of recent history, too, Counselor. I think that's the other thing to note. So it's hard to know, but we would expect that this is going to be going to grow pretty substantially and potentially early in the year.
All right, and so you need, your idea of a reserve fund is so that you can pivot.
Correct.
What would be the other costs besides unemployment?
I'm sorry, Counselor.
What would be the other costs besides unemployment that you would anticipate funding out of this?
Some members will be entitled to having large buyouts for their final payments for vacation, potentially sick, depending on if they are going to retire.
So again, that is a cost related to termination of employment.
Exactly. Some of those costs will be defrayed as an employee leaves and separates. Their healthcare costs will diminish. The cost to the employer, of their healthcare costs. So there will be some saving. It's just very hard to project precisely what those were, and that we didn't put lots of emphasis at the time. But that's another reason why this reserve was proposed, is that we'd have the ability to move those resources to the department budgets as we know more about when we actually get real bills and have a better sense of that. Which again, I think we would fully anticipate the Ways and Means will want to know how we're doing on that, and we'd be reporting back on that.
Okay, and again, in the personnel HR administration budget, there is a line for retirement sick leave. It's not for, termination of employment and other factors, but that's where sick leave buyback is. You don't have a line that really suits the circumstances that you're talking about for buybacks and things like, you've got one vacation buyback, you've got one that's funded at $200,000 and it's been expended as far as $264,000 since FY21. So you could have put money in that one as well. I understand why you're doing it. I understand the need for flexibility. I'm just, and so Okay, thank you.
And of that 1.5 million, the 500,000 that you're presuming will go to schools, if this is going into human resources / administration / payroll restructuring, then to move it to schools, does that require coming back to the council? If you're moving it out of one area into another, if it's being earmarked for human resources administration, payroll restructuring?
It's not assumed. I mean, I would say that, no, I don't believe it's required. That we would, similar to a collective bargaining reserve. So traditionally with a collective bargaining reserve, the reason the town council will act on that is they are required to essentially ratify that, and the reserve is set up and then funds are then transferred. It's not the actual transfer of the funding. So that this wouldn't necessarily require, it's not contemplated that we would require a further act to be able to transfer funds.
Thank you. I'd like to follow up with our town auditor on that one. I don't know if anybody, I know he's not here tonight, unfortunately. I'm sorry, Councilor Flaherty, were you going to ask a question? Well, yes, go right ahead.
So I agree with the sentiment that I would appreciate a conversation with the town auditor, but I also, to help make that conversation as productive as possible, I would like to understand if we didn't allocate $1.5 million to free cash for this purpose, but we wanted to ensure that the money, would we just not pass that motion and then it would stay in free cash? Is that how that, and then it would be available as it was appropriated further for whatever purpose the mayor's office wished to put it to? Or would it need to be planted in a different budget line?
I think that probably what I would expect we probably would, in that case, is that we would wait till fiscal 24's free cash was certified, and then we would, just work again to report what the costs are that we're essentially needing to be defrayed, as they were being incurred. And presumably, hopefully, we would be addressing that, I don't want to say early and have it represented as like a couple months, but, relatively early into the fiscal 25, so that that wasn't something that it was drawn out over a period of time. I guess if I had to speculate, that would probably be the most likely alternative, I would guess, we would follow.
Okay.
Councilor Moore?
Mike, I think it's really, it kind of stinks that you're sitting here alone on this one. I think you should have, you should have had a counsel with you, a solicitor with you or not. I think you're handling the questions very well nonetheless. If you don't have this fund, you've created this fund so that you wouldn't have to put another $1.5 million into the budget for unemployment and related costs to transitioning people out, right?
Correct.
Okay. So there's no question you're going to need this.
I don't think there's any question.
This is regardless of whether the override passes or not. You're going to need to have money available to pay for the costs related to terminating employment of 50 to 60 people. Correct?
Yeah, you've emphasized the line items that we had funded here are not sufficient to
Right.
carry the cost that we'd expect.
And you didn't include it in there because you wanted to avoid funding the operational budget with free cash as it has been done in the past.
Correct.
Okay. I understand why you're doing this.
Thank you, Councilor Moore. Any other questions for Mr. Esmond at this time? Okay, and we will be back next week, don't worry, for our full council meeting. All right, and thank you, Director Esmond. I echo Councilor Moran's sentiments. We really appreciate all the time you have spent with us and all of the explanations. Very short amount of time on the job, so thank you for that. Any other questions or concerns this evening before we move on to the motions? Okay. Hearing none. Do we have a motion? For favorable recommendation to the full council?
Madam Chair, prior to entertaining the motion, I would
Yep.
like to offer amendments to the budget. I have previously provided a list of 10. I am only going to offer 3. And my first amendment would be, I would move to amend Exhibit A by reducing Town Council Department 111 Administration 01 by $5,000 from an amount of $47,500 to $42,500, so that my salary as district counselor is zeroed out.
Any discussion on that motion? Or that, amendment, rather, forgive me. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Reynolds.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I want to pray, I understand the intentions of offering up the counselor's salary to put back into the overall budget. One of the things is that this council has worked very, very diligently through the years, and particularly my 3 years on this council, with the number of hours and that we put in, what we have provided. At times, it's really a very it's a tough issue for me to try to get my head around in terms of seeing the value of it in terms of what are the longer view of, this council works very hard.
Point of order, Madam Chair. I don't believe my motion has been seconded, so it's not available for discussion.
Clerk Semino. Okay, thank you, Councilor Moran, forgive me for that. So so you said you had 3. Are we taking them all, is your intention to take them all up as amendments
Individually, yes.
individually?
Yep.
Okay, so is there a second? Hearing none, you want to move to your next amendment?
Next amendment would be, I would move to amend Exhibit A by reducing Planning and Community Development Department, number 175, Administration 01 by $1,904 from an amount of $343,000 to $341,000, reducing the proposed increase from 8.2% to 2.5%.
Is there a second? Hearing none?
And finally, I would move Exhibit A be amended by reducing Public Works Department 400 Facilities 02 by $2,228 from an amount of strike that. I strike that. Where is facilities? Thank you. I would move to amend Exhibit A by reducing Department 4002 DPW, line item 511002, Facilities Department Head, from $165,000 to $165,543 to $163,315.
Is there a second? Hearing none, the motions fail. Okay, we're going to move on to our other motions this evening, and thank you, Councilor Moran. I know you spent a lot of time on that.
Madam Chair, if I could just point of personal privilege at this point.
Go right ahead.
I hope that in the future that there is a more clear time delineated for motions for amendments to budgets to be submitted so that if councilors have concerns, that they can be addressed beforehand. I apologize that I didn't get these to my board members or fellow board members earlier than today. I am unfamiliar with the process that this committee has followed in the past. It has been my experience on working with budgets that amendments are offered at the conclusion of consideration and hearing from all departments that are included in a budget. And that's why I brought them forward no sooner than today and didn't discuss them until they were in an open session. I'd be happy to do it in a more advanced notice process going forward. I don't think this committee is used to considering amendments to the overall budget. So I think it was a bit of an oversight, but I think it would be better if we could, going forward when we're putting out a schedule, to identify a time where amendments should be in, the form that they should be in, and when they could be discussed prior to the final vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Moran, and with all due respect, that's the point of many of the sessions that we've had over the last 3 weeks. That's the time to have those discussions in open session, and so there is ample opportunity as well, but appreciate that sentiment. Okay, with that, we will now move on to the motions before us for 24020. Is there a motion? And there will be 9 to vote on this evening.
Madam Chair, I move for favorable recommendation to the full council. Motion number 1, that the town of Braintree raise and appropriate the sum of $162,182,692 to provide for all of the expenses for the maintenance and operation of the town's several departments and programs for the fiscal year 2025, and that the several sums herein set forth are hereby approved for the several purposes and are subject to the source of funding for said expenditures as outlined on Exhibit A, specifically that the sum of $106,149 be transferred from golf course receipts, the sum of $300,000 be transferred from the overlay surplus account, the sum of $28,500 be transferred from the Waterways Improvement Fund, the sum of $22,000 be transferred from the sale of cemetery lots, that the sum of $1,037,517 be transferred from water and sewer receipts. The sum of $57,670 shall include $2,659,099 from the debt exclusion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous.
Madam Chair, I move secondly that an amount of $921,000 be transferred from the FY 2023 certified free cash provided that such a transfer shall be deemed to be repealed if the Massachusetts General Court approves changes to local options proposed under the Governor's Municipal Empowerment Act of 2024, and such options are subsequently approved by the Town Council to become effective by October 1st, 2024.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous.
Madam Chair, I move that the Town of Braintree appropriate the sum of $2,127,372 to provide for all of the expenses for the maintenance and operation of the town's golf course and related programs for the fiscal year 2025, and that the several sums herein set forth are hereby approved for the several purposes as outlined on Exhibit A specifically, and that the sum of $2,127,372 be raised in the golf course receipts.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous.
Madam Chair, I move that the Town of Braintree appropriate the sum of $23,905,193 for all of the expenses for the maintenance and operation of the town's water and sewer divisions and related programs for fiscal year 2025, and that the several sums herein set forth are hereby approved for the several purposes as outlined on Exhibit A, specifically that the sum of $146,000 be transferred from the Water Sewer Rehabilitation Fund, and the balance of $23,759,193 be raised in the water and sewer receipts.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous.
Madam Chair, I move that the Town of Braintree appropriate the sum of $1,624,405 to provide for all of the expenses for the maintenance and operation of the town's stormwater division and related programs for the fiscal year 2025, and that the several sums herein set forth are hereby approved for the several purposes as outlined on Exhibit A specifically, and that the sum of $1,624,405 be raised in the stormwater receipts.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous.
I move that the Town of Braintree appropriate the sum of $630,175 to provide for all of the expenses for the maintenance and operation for the town's cable, television, public education, and government access and related programs for the fiscal year 2025, and that the several sums herein set forth are hereby approved for the several purposes as outlined on Exhibit A specifically, and that the sum of $630,175 be raised in the cable franchise fees receipts.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous.
Madam Chair, I move that pursuant to General Law, Chapter 44, Section 31D, the town is authorized to incur a liability in excess of the amount appropriated for snow and ice for fiscal year 2025.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous.
Madam Chair, I move that the sum of $4 million be transferred from fiscal year 2023 certified free cash to the Stabilization Fund 8341.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous.
Madam Chair, I move that the sum of $1,500,000 be transferred from fiscal year 2023 certified free cash to our Human Resources Administration Payroll Restructuring Reserve, which shall be established for the purpose of defraying one-time costs of town departments incurred during the fiscal year 2025.
Second for discussion. On this particular motion, I think I would like to reserve judgment until after I've spoken to the town auditor. So I'm going to abstain from this one. Unless there's some other alternative that others would like to discuss now.
Thank you, Councillor Flaherty. Did anybody else have?
For point of order, is this motion been seconded?
It has been seconded for discussion, yes.
Thank you.
And I would add to that, I feel similarly to Councillor Flaherty. I'm going to abstain on this particular motion this evening. I would like clarity both from our town auditor and also from the mayor's office on, there has been several references that 500,000 of this amount would be going to the schools, but there was also an intimation that $1.5 million would be needed for employee separation. So I just would like to clarify And it does, you don't have to, you can respond, Director Esmond, but if not, that's fine.
For the confusion, the $1.5 million does include the 500,000. What we don't know, we don't project right now that the $1.5 million is the cost of the other associated separation costs. We simply don't know. I mean, if that's part of the concern, I think we just want to make sure that we're not essentially saying we know there's $1.5 million in costs and we also would use this for schools. It's not exclusive. They're not sort of separate in for that. It is absolutely the mayor's intent that at least 500,000 of this would be made available, working with the schools to defray costs that they're incurring in fiscal '25 that are identified as one time and would help them manage through a challenging fiscal year. So the 500,000 is absolutely part of this 1.5 million.
Understood. I just want to make sure that there's clarity because there's 500,000 for the schools. Could feel different if it's going towards taking care of layoffs versus other costs. So but I understand. Thank you for clarification. We do have a motion and a second with discussion. Any further discussion? Councilor Flaherty?
I said that I was going to abstain, but I don't know. If other people feel confident in voting for it or against it, then that's one thing. But if nobody is prepared to vote at this point because they don't feel they have enough information, we can't all abstain, can we?
I have a
It can be
motion
an
and a second.
unfavorable recommendation.
Madam Chair, I don't intend to abstain. I understand that $500,000 is going to be for school costs that are one time, and in the spirit of using free cash, that the balance of that will go towards termination of employment in a number of departments. So it may be 500,000 goes to the school for recurring or for non-recurring issues related to FY25. And another large sum of that remaining million goes to the schools to deal with transitioning out or reducing staff.
Right.
And then another portion goes to the rest of the departments that are going to be hit.
Yeah.
So I understand why you're doing what you're doing. I understand why it's unpredictable because you don't know how many of the people that are laid off are going to be out of work and for how long and what each of their costs will be.
Right.
So I get it. I understand the need for flexibility. I think you're being upfront about this rather than plowing it into operational costs and acting like it wasn't non-recurring, like it has been done in previous years. You're being upfront about it, as transparent as you can be. You're being honest about the fact that you don't know what your costs are. So I don't know what more we can ask of you.
Thank you, Councilor Moore. Councilor Reynolds?
I plan on voting for recommendation to the council for further for a vote.
Thank you, Councilor Reynolds.
For a vote of the full council.
Yeah.
This gives us an opportunity, if I may, just gives
Please.
the full council the opportunity to discuss this, as well as I would agree with the previous speaker, Councilor Moran, that this to me is prudent.
Thank you, Councilor Reynolds. Councilor Maglio, did you have something?
Yes, so it's essentially what we're saying is there are these known unknowns coming up, and rather than beating a path back every time there's another financial situation to manage, as it's related to this very specific pool, that you're just creating the pool. And we're sort of approving in this body, and it'll go to the full council, but we're saying, yes, we understand there's these known unknowns, and that has to come from this pool. And so I think I would vote for full consideration by the council, and I think that here's where my dilemma is. I am for it because of the transparency of the current administration, but not as a general practice moving forward, nor would I have been for it last year.
Yeah.
So I need to, what I want to resolve for myself is that sort of a logical and ethical and practical decision that should we base, because we're not, I don't know if we should base it on who's asking versus what a better process is. So I need to think about that.
Thank you, Councilor Maglio. Okay. For number 9, we have a motion and we have a second. Are councilors now prepared to vote or abstain? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those abstain? I'm abstaining. Any opposed? Okay. 2 abstain, 3 in favor. That closes out our process for the Ways and Means Committee. I want to extend heartfelt thanks to all the committee members. This has not been easy nor quick. And I know it's taken us all away from other aspects of our lives, as well as Director Esmond and our ever faithful and oh so valuable Clerk of the Council, Susan Semino, who is here with us every single night and also working tirelessly behind the scenes to make sure everything goes according to schedule. So thank you, Clerk Semino, for keeping it all together for us. Okay. I want to also say thank you to our BCAM team. Tonight we have Bill Needham and Jerry Comack here, but I know Martha Constantinidis has been with us several nights as well. It's a big deal for residents to not have to trek to Town Hall. They can watch these meetings at their convenience with the computer in their pocket if they want to, and that's thanks to BCAM. So our next meeting will be on Wednesday, May 29th. Again, it's a Wednesday night at 7 p.m., so 2 changes from the typical council schedule. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? This meeting is adjourned.